She went to end a marriage no one was supposed to know about, but 2 pink lines turned her escape into a bond neither of them could ever break. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. The apartment didn't exist on any map that mattered. That was the first thing Ava learned when she stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a quiet, deliberate click. No concierge, no cameras in the hallway, no neighbors who asked questions. Just polished wood floors, muted lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city without ever truly belonging to it. This place was meant to be invisible, just like their marriage. She slipped her coat off slowly, fingers stiff from the cold and from the weight of what she was about to say. Christmas lights glimmered faintly on the street below, cheerful and oblivious. A countdown to something hopeful, something she no longer felt entitled to. He stood near the window, back to her, dark suit perfectly pressed despite the late hour. Even alone, even here, he looked like a man who never let his guard down. "You're late," he said calmly. "I almost didn't come," Ava replied. That made him turn. His gaze landed on her instantly, sharp, assessing, unreadable. The kind of look that had once made her feel safe, powerful even. Now it just reminded her how carefully constructed everything between them had always been. "You always come," he said. She swallowed. "Not this time." Silence stretched between them, heavy and deliberate. He studied her face, as if searching for the fracture line beneath her composure. Their marriage had never been about love. It had been about survival. A name. A signature. A ring that bought her protection when she needed it most. He had offered it without romance, without promises. Just a contract wrapped in vows no one else ever heard. Married in secret, hidden from the world. Temporary. At least that's what she'd told herself. "You said this would end before Christmas," Ava continued, forcing the words out before courage abandoned her. "That I'd get my life back." He didn't interrupt, didn't deny it. "That was the plan," he said quietly. "Plans change," she replied. "People don't always survive them." A flicker of something crossed his face, too quick to name. Annoyance, concern, maybe regret. "You were safe," he said. "That was the purpose." "And now I'm tired of hiding," she snapped. "Tired of being someone's secret, someone's liability." His jaw tightened. "You were never a liability." "Then why couldn't anyone know?" she demanded. "Why did I have to disappear every time you walked into a room?" "Because you mattered," he almost said. But he didn't. Instead, he walked closer, stopping just short of her, his presence filling the space between them. "Freedom has a price," he said evenly. "And silence was ours." Ava laughed softly, bitter. "I didn't realize silence would feel like erasing myself." She moved past him, pacing once, heart pounding. This was harder than she'd imagined. Ending something, even something false, still felt like a loss. "I want out," she said finally, the words trembling despite her resolve. "I want the marriage annulled, quietly, like you promised." The room seemed to still. He stared at her, eyes darkening, not with anger, but calculation. The same look he wore when deals unraveled and blood followed. "You chose this," he said. "I chose survival," she replied. "Not imprisonment." "You're not imprisoned. Then let me go." The city lights flickered behind him, casting shadows across his face. He was thinking several moves ahead, weighing consequences she couldn't see. "If you leave," he said slowly, "you walk away from my protection." "I know. And if you talk—" "I won't," she interrupted. "I never have." Another pause, longer this time. "You want freedom before Christmas," he said at last. "Yes." He nodded once. "Then we end it. Cleanly." Relief flooded her so fast it almost knocked her off balance. But then he added, quieter, sharper, "Tonight." Her breath caught. I need you to understand something, he continued. Once you walk out that door, there's no return. No safety net. No name to hide behind. Ava met his gaze, forcing steadiness into her voice. I don't want to hide anymore. For a long moment he said nothing. Then she whispered the words that changed everything. I want out of this marriage. And for the first time since they'd signed those secret papers, he realized letting her go might be the most dangerous mistake he'd ever make. He didn't raise his voice. That was what unsettled Ava most. She had braced herself for anger, for threats sharpened into something cruel, for the kind of dominance he used when negotiations turned bloody. She had even prepared for indifference. What she hadn't expected was calm. The kind of calm that meant he had already accepted her decision, and was now calculating how to survive it. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the leather sofa. I don't need to sit, Ava replied. He didn't repeat himself. He simply waited. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she crossed the room and lowered herself onto the edge of the cushion, hands clenched in her lap. The apartment felt smaller now, the walls closing in with every breath she took. He remained standing. When we married, he said evenly, you understood one thing above all else. Secrecy, she answered quietly. Yes. You needed to disappear, he continued. Your name, your address, your past, everything had to vanish. I made that possible. I know, she said, and I'm grateful. Grateful wasn't enough. It never had been. And in exchange, he went on, you agreed to silence. Ava lifted her gaze. I've kept it. You've kept it so far. The emphasis landed like a warning. She straightened. I'm not going to expose you, or this. That was never my intention. I believe you, he said. That surprised her. But belief doesn't stop consequences, he added. Intent doesn't erase risk. She exhaled slowly. Then tell me what you want. His eyes locked onto hers, dark and unyielding. I want you to remember that freedom doesn't mean immunity. The words sent a chill through her. If you leave, he continued, you don't take anything with you. No documents, no photos, no records. The marriage ceases to exist. I understand. You change your number, he said. Your routine, where you shop, who you see. That wasn't part of the agreement, she said. It is now. Anger flared. You said I'd get my life back. You will, he replied. A quieter one. She shook her head. You're punishing me. I'm protecting myself, he said without hesitation. And by extension, you. Ava laughed bitterly. You don't get to frame control as protection anymore. His gaze sharpened. You don't get to pretend my world stops being dangerous because you're tired of it. Silence fell, thick and heavy. He moved then, crossing the room and sitting opposite her, elbows resting on his knees. For the first time since she'd arrived, he looked directly at her. Not as an asset, not as a wife, but as a variable he couldn't afford to miscalculate. Do you know how many men would pay to know my weaknesses? He asked quietly. Ava swallowed. You are one of them, he continued. Not by choice, by proximity. She stiffened. I would never... I know, he interrupted. But others won't care what you'd never do. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach, a strange, fleeting wave of nausea rolling through her. So what happens if I leave? She asked. His jaw tightened. You live. If you're careful. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one. She stood abruptly, needing space, air. You can't threaten me into staying. I'm not, he said. I'm warning you. The distinction felt razor thin. You will be watched, he continued. Not closely, not obviously, but enough that if someone comes asking questions, I know. Her breath caught. You said I'd be free. You will be, he repeated. Free doesn't mean alone. She turned back to him. anger burning through the fear. "And if I refuse your conditions?" His eyes hardened. "Then I can't protect you from the consequences," he said. "What consequences?" she demanded. He held her gaze unwavering. "The kind that don't come from me." The words settled like ice in her chest. She realized then that walking away wasn't the clean break she'd imagined. It was a step into a world where silence wasn't just expected, it was enforced. And as she stared at the man she was trying to leave behind, Ava understood something terrifying. Freedom had a price, and she was only just beginning to pay it.
Ava didn't remember the drive home.
She remembered the way the city lights blurred into streaks of color through her windshield. The way her hands trembled on the steering wheel, no matter how tightly she gripped it. The way his words echoed in her head. Silence, consequences, protection, layering over each other until they became a dull roar she couldn't escape. By the time she locked the door of her apartment behind her, it was well past midnight. The place felt unfamiliar, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Boxes still half-packed from moves she'd never finished. A Christmas mug on the counter she hadn't had the heart to throw away. A coat draped over a chair that still smelled faintly like his cologne from the last time he'd been here, weeks ago, when pretending had still been easier than deciding. Her stomach twisted. She pressed her palm flat against it, breathing slowly, trying to calm the sudden wave of nausea that rolled through her again. It wasn't the first time that night, or the second. "Get it together," she whispered to the empty room. Stress did strange things to the body. Anyone knew that. Sleepless nights, anxiety, the weight of walking away from the only protection she'd had for months. She kicked off her shoes and headed for the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. Her reflection stared back at her, pale, eyes too bright, mouth drawn tight with a fear she hadn't named yet. Another wave hit her, stronger this time. Ava swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the sink as something cold and unmistakable slid down her spine. Number. She shook her head, almost laughing. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. She'd been careful. She always was. The marriage had been strategic, controlled. Nothing reckless allowed to exist inside it. Not even feelings. But memory betrayed her. Late nights, locked doors. The way control sometimes slipped when silence pressed too hard. The way he'd looked at her the last time, like restraint was something he was choosing, not something he lacked. Her breath caught. The cabinet beneath the sink creaked open. She crouched, heart pounding, and stared at the small white box tucked behind cleaning supplies she rarely used. She'd bought it weeks ago. Not because she believed she needed it, but because some part of her had known. Because instinct was louder than logic, even when she refused to listen. Her hands shook as she opened the box. "This is ridiculous," she murmured. Still, she followed the instructions, mechanically, like she was operating outside her body, watching someone else make choices she didn't want to own yet. The seconds stretched impossibly long. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, elbows on her knees, staring at the stick resting on the counter like it might explode. Her heart hammered so violently she could hear it in her ears. "One line," she told herself. "Please." The timer beeped. Ava stood slowly, legs weak, and leaned over the counter. 2 pink lines stared back at her. Clear, undeniable, permanent. The room tilted. "No," she whispered. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears blurring her vision as the truth crashed down on her with brutal force. This wasn't fear, or stress, or exhaustion. This was real. A life she hadn't planned for. A bond she hadn't consented to negotiate. A consequence far greater than silence. Her chest heaved as she sank to the floor, back against the cold tile, the test clutched in her shaking hand. Everything made sense now, the nausea, the dizziness, the way her body had betrayed her long before her mind was ready to catch up. She wasn't just walking away from a marriage. She was carrying his child. A sob tore free, sharp and panicked. She laughed through it, a broken sound that echoed off the bathroom walls. This changes everything. Her thoughts spiraled immediately, to danger, to enemies, to the way his world devoured weakness without mercy, to the way he'd looked at her tonight when she said she wanted out. Like letting her go was a calculation he hadn't finished. You can't disappear now, a voice inside her whispered. And worse, you can't lie. Ava dragged herself to her feet and stared at her reflection again. She looked the same. Nothing about her had changed on the outside, but her life had split cleanly down the middle. She turned off the bathroom light and stood in the darkness, the city humming faintly beyond her walls. Christmas lights blinked cheerfully outside her window, mocking her with promises of peace and endings. She wasn't free. Not anymore. Because no matter how badly she wanted to leave, no matter how much she feared what staying meant, she couldn't walk away without telling him. The apartment looked exactly the same. That was what unsettled Ava the most as she stepped inside hours later, her hands clenched so tightly around her coat straps that her fingers ached. Same muted lighting, same untouched glass on the counter, same city stretching endlessly beyond the windows like nothing in the world had shifted. But everything had. He stood near the table this time, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled back to reveal forearms marked faintly with scars she pretended not to notice. He didn't look surprised to see her again. That alone told her he'd expected this. "You came back," he said calmly. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Inside, panic clawed at her ribs, frantic and relentless. She'd rehearsed this 100 times in the car, on the elevator, in the hallway outside the door, but now that she was here, the words lodged in her throat like broken glass. He watched her closely, gaze flicking once, just once, to the way her hand hovered protectively over her stomach before she caught herself and dropped it. That was when his expression changed. "What happened?" he asked. She swallowed. "I need you to listen." "I am." Ava took a step forward, then stopped. She didn't sit, didn't pace. She needed to stay upright for this, needed to feel the ground beneath her feet. "I went home," she began. "I tried to forget tonight ever happened." His jaw tightened slightly. And I couldn't. Silence thickened the room. "I took a test," she said quietly. He didn't move. "I didn't plan to," she continued, words tumbling faster now that she'd started. "I didn't expect. This wasn't part of anything we agreed to. I was careful. I swear I was—" "Ava," he said sharply. She stopped. "What test?" he asked. Her fingers trembled as she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the small white stick, holding it like it might burn her skin. She didn't cross the room. She just held it up, letting the distance speak for itself. 2 pink lines. For a long moment, he didn't react. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then he took a single step forward. Another. He stopped an arm's length away, eyes fixed on the test like it was a weapon pointed at his chest. His face went completely still, every trace of emotion draining away until he looked carved from stone. "Say it," he said. "I'm pregnant," Ava whispered. The words echoed softly in the room. Something fractured behind his eyes. Not panic, not anger. Calculation, colliding violently with something raw and unguarded. "That's not possible," he said. "I know it shouldn't be," she replied. "But it is." He turned away abruptly, dragging a hand through his hair as if trying to physically shake the thought loose. He paced once, then stopped near the window, staring out at the city like it had just betrayed him. An heir. The word didn't need to be spoken to fill the space. "You understand what this means," he said finally. "Yes," she said. "That's why I'm here." He faced her again, eyes dark now, sharpened with something dangerous. "This doesn't just affect you. Or me. This changes everything." "I know." "In my world," he continued, voice low and controlled, "a child is leverage, a target, a declaration of weakness." Her chest tightened. "I'm not weak. No, he agreed. But you'll be seen that way anyway. She took a shaky breath. I didn't come here to trap you. I didn't come for money or protection or... You came because you're carrying my child, he said flatly. And that makes you my responsibility. The word landed heavy. I don't want to be your responsibility, she said. I want to be safe. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping so close she could feel the heat of him. You will be, he said. Not a promise, a command. But then he pulled back slightly, the control slipping just enough for her to see the truth beneath it. I need confirmation, he said. Medical, immediate. That's fair. And until then, he continued, you don't go home. You don't move without my knowledge. You don't tell anyone. Her heart raced. You said I could leave. That was before, he replied. This changes the rules. Ava stared at him, fear and resolve colliding painfully inside her. And if I refuse? His gaze hardened. Then you're unprotected, he said. And I won't allow that. Not now. She realized then that the man standing in front of her wasn't negotiating anymore. He was planning. For the child, he added quietly, I will provide protection. Absolute. And me? She asked. His eyes met hers, yark and unwavering. You come with the child. The silence that followed was heavy with inevitability, and Ava understood with terrifying clarity that the moment those 2 pink lines appeared, her marriage had stopped being something she could walk away from. It had become a legacy, and he was already prepared to defend it at any cost. The contract wasn't written on paper. Ava realized that the moment he closed the door behind them and the lock slid into place with a soft, final sound, the apartment no longer felt like neutral ground. It felt like a command center, quiet, controlled, and waiting for orders that would ripple far beyond these walls. He poured himself a drink, but didn't offer her one. That, more than anything, told her how serious this was. Our marriage can't end, he said, turning back to her. The words landed without ceremony, no softness, no apology. Just truth, delivered the way he delivered everything else. Ava crossed her arms, more to steady herself than to defend. You don't get to decide that alone. In my world, he replied calmly. I do. Anger flared hot and immediate. You said this would be over before Christmas. And it would have been, he said, if not for the child. Her hand drifted again to her stomach, instinctive now, impossible to stop. The reality of it still felt unreal, like something happening just slightly outside her body. You don't get to use the baby as leverage, she said. I'm not, he replied. My enemies will. Silence stretched between them, thick with implications she didn't want to fully imagine. You think secrecy will protect us? She said. It didn't before. No, he agreed. That's why secrecy ends. Her breath caught. What? Our marriage becomes known, he continued, voice steady. Not to the public, not to the press, but to the people who matter. To your enemies, she whispered. Shh! Fear slid cold and sharp down her spine. That paints a target on my back. It puts you under my name, he corrected, which makes you untouchable. She let out a bitter laugh. Nothing in your world is untouchable. No, he said quietly. But there are lines no one crosses twice. He moved toward the table and opened a drawer she'd never seen used before. Inside were phones, burners, all of them. He selected one and set it down between them. They'll know by morning, he said, that the marriage stands, that the child exists. Her pulse spiked. You're announcing my pregnancy? I'm announcing a future, he replied. One that makes you off limits. Ava stared at the phone like it was a loaded weapon. And if I don't agree? He looked at her then, really looked. Eyes dark, expression stripped of anything but brutal honesty. Then you walk out that door, he said, and every man who wants leverage against me will see you as an opportunity. The words weren't a threat. They were a fact. Her chest tightened painfully. You're trapping me. I'm anchoring you, he said. There's a difference. You're asking me to stay married to a man I tried to leave, she shot back. I'm telling you that leaving is no longer an option, he replied. The finality in his voice sent a chill through her. You talk about contracts, she said hoarsely. About agreements. Where is my choice in this one? He stepped closer, stopping just short of her space. Your choice was when you came back and told me the truth. Her throat burned. That wasn't a choice. That was the right thing. In my world, he said, they're rarely different. She looked away, blinking back tears she refused to shed in front of him. So what happens now? He didn't hesitate. You stay with me, he said. In my house. Under my protection. I don't want to live in a fortress, she whispered. You'll live, he replied. And so will the child. The words sliced through every argument she had left. And the marriage? She asked quietly. He met her gaze, unwavering. It becomes real. Her heart slammed against her ribs. You said it never would. I was wrong, he said. Or circumstances changed. The result is the same. She laughed softly, hollow. This is a new contract. Yes, he agreed. One written in blood if necessary. The implication hung heavy between them. Violence as policy, protection as a promise that could not be broken. Ava slowly sank onto the edge of the sofa, the weight of it all crashing down at once. Freedom was gone. Silence was gone. The future she'd imagined, clean, simple, hers, had evaporated the moment two pink lines appeared. And as he stood over her, already issuing orders into one of the phones, she understood the truth she'd been trying to avoid. The marriage she'd tried to end hadn't just survived. It had become a weapon, and she was expected to wield it by staying. The house was nothing like the apartment. Ava realized that the moment the gates closed behind them, iron sliding into place with a sound that vibrated deep in her chest. This wasn't a place meant to disappear. It was meant to endure. Stone and steel wrapped in elegance, hidden just far enough from the city to feel untouchable. Luxury greeted her first. Warm marble beneath her feet. Soft light spilling from chandeliers that didn't glare, but glowed. A staircase that curved like it belonged in another century. Everything was expensive, yes, but purposeful. Built to protect as much as to impress. Security followed close behind. She felt it immediately. Cameras tucked discreetly into corners. Men stationed where sightlines overlapped. Doors that locked silently the moment they closed. Nothing accidental. Nothing unseen. You'll have full access to the house, he said as they walked inside. Except the lower wing and the east offices. And my phone? She asked. He glanced at her. Monitored. The word landed hard. So I'm not a wife, she said quietly. I'm an asset. His jaw tightened. You're protected. There's a difference, she replied. He didn't deny it. Her room, no, their room, was expansive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a fireplace already lit. A bed that looked untouched, waiting. Her things had already been moved in, clothes arranged, toiletries set out. Someone had planned this down to the smallest detail. Someone had assumed she would stay. Rules were explained calmly. When she could leave the property, who accompanied her, what she could say, and to whom. Doctors were vetted, appointments scheduled. Nothing was left to chance. At night, the house never slept. Ava lay awake, listening to the distant hum of security systems and footsteps changing shifts. She'd never felt so safe or so watched. And he was always there. Not hovering, not crowding, just present. In the doorway, at the far end of the table. Across the room, watching her with a gaze that tracked every breath like he was memorizing her existence. She caught him once, late in the evening, standing outside the nursery that had appeared without discussion. Dark wood, Soft light, empty crib. "You didn't ask me if I wanted this," she said. He didn't turn. I assumed. That's dangerous.
So is hesitation.
Days passed, then weeks. She learned his rhythms. When he woke, when he worked. When the weight of his world pressed down hard enough that he went silent instead of angry. She learned that he drank less now, that he slept lighter, that his hand always found the small of her back when they walked, grounding himself as much as guiding her. And slowly, against her will, she felt it. The pull! It crept in during quiet moments, when he brought her tea without comment because he noticed she'd gone pale. When he stood between her and a raised voice without thinking. When his hand lingered just a second longer than necessary at night, restraint warring with something far more dangerous. One evening, she found him in the study, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, reading reports she didn't ask about. "You don't trust me," she said. He looked up slowly. "I trust you with my child." "That's not the same thing. It's more," he replied. The admission unsettled her. She stepped closer. "You're not supposed to care." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Neither were you." Silence stretched between them, charged and intimate. That night, as she lay beside him, the space between them felt smaller than it ever had. Not from force, from gravity. His arm rested near her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. She realized then that this wasn't just control. It was fear. Not of enemies. Not of weakness. Of losing her. He shifted in his sleep, his hand finding her stomach instinctively, protective, even unconscious. Ava stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. That was when the truth settled in, slow and undeniable. He wasn't just protecting her because of the child. He was falling. Harder than he would ever admit. And that, she knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. The first warning arrived wrapped in silk and silence. Ava didn't see it. Not at first. She was sitting in the sunroom with a cup of tea she hadn't touched, one hand resting absently on her stomach as she stared out at the winter garden beyond the glass. Snow dusted the hedges in careful lines. Everything looked orderly, controlled, safe. That illusion shattered when one of the guards entered without knocking. He never did that. "There's been a development," he said carefully, eyes flicking once, just once, to her hand before snapping back to her face. Her pulse spiked.
What kind of development?
That! Before he could answer, the door behind him opened and her husband stepped in, coat still on, expression carved from something cold and lethal. "Leave us," he said. The guard obeyed immediately. Ava stood. "What's going on?" He crossed the room and set a small velvet box on the table between them. Black, expensive, unassuming. Her stomach tightened. "What is that?" "Open it," he said. She hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet. Elegant, feminine, beautiful, and stained dark red on the inside clasp. Ava sucked in a sharp breath. "Is that blood?" he confirmed. "Not yours." Her knees weakened. "Whose?" "A message," he replied. Her throat went dry. "From who?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze had gone distant, calculating, as if already mapping retaliation. "They know," he said finally. "About the pregnancy." The words landed like a blow. "I thought you said only your inner circle knew," she whispered. "They did," he replied. "Which means someone talked, or someone watched closely enough to connect the dots." Fear crept up her spine, cold and insistent. "Who?" "A man named Caldero," he said. "He's been patient, quiet. He believes information is worth more than bullets. And now he knows about the baby," she said. "Yes." Ava pressed her palm protectively to her stomach, breath shallow. "What does he want?" He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw it, the fury barely contained beneath his control.
He wants leverage, he said. And he's arrogant enough to think he can touch what's mine.
The word mine sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. You told me being public to your enemies would protect me, she said. You said it would make me untouchable. It does, he replied, to men who value self-preservation. And Caldero doesn't. No. Her voice shook.
What happens now?
He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Now security doubles. You don't leave this house without me. You don't answer calls. You don't open doors. I already don't, she said. That wasn't strict enough, he replied. Anger flared through the fear. You can't lock me away. I can, he said calmly. And I will if it keeps you alive. Before she could argue, a sharp crack split the air. Glass exploded inward. Ava screamed as something slammed into the wall inches from where she'd been standing moments before. Her husband moved instantly, grabbing her and dragging her down behind the heavy table as another shot rang out. Gunfire. Not distant, not theoretical. Real.
Down,
he barked, covering her body with his own. Her heart pounded wildly as alarms screamed through the house, guards shouting into radios, boots thundering down hallways. Another shot shattered a window, spraying glass across the floor. They're inside the perimeter, someone yelled. Ava clutched his coat, shaking violently. Oh my God! His body went rigid above her, fury radiating off him like heat. Stay with me, he said, voice deadly calm. Do not let go. More shots echoed, closer now. He lifted her without warning, cradling her protectively as he moved through the chaos, guards flanking them, guns raised. The world blurred into noise and motion and terror. A shot rang out again. Something tore past them. Ava screamed as pain exploded in her shoulder. Not a bullet, but shrapnel, burning hot and sharp. Blood. Her blood. He roared her name, a sound she'd never heard from him before. Raw, animal, stripped of all control. The last thing she saw before darkness closed in was his face above hers, eyes wild with fear and rage, and the terrible certainty that her pregnancy had turned her into a target. The world came back in fragments. Ava was dimly aware of movement first, being carried, voices overlapping, the sharp smell of antiseptic cutting through smoke and blood. Pain pulsed dully in her shoulder, distant and surreal, like it belonged to someone else. Her body felt heavy, unresponsive, wrapped in something warm and tight. His arms. That much she knew without opening her eyes. Stay with me, he was saying, over and over. The words weren't commands anymore. They were pleas, raw and unfiltered, torn from a place she'd never heard him speak from before. I'm here, she tried to say, but it came out as a breath. His grip tightened, careful not to hurt her, but desperate enough that she felt his fear vibrating through him. The car doors slammed. The engine roared to life. She drifted again. When she woke fully, the ceiling above her was white. Too white. Lights hummed softly, steady and clinical. Her arm was immobilized, bandaged thickly, an IV taped to her hand. A hospital room. She turned her head slowly. He was there. Sitting beside the bed, suit rumpled, blood dried dark at the cuff of his sleeve. His tie was gone. His hair disheveled in a way she'd never seen. He looked undone. Relief flooded his face the moment her eyes opened. You scared me, he said hoarsely. The admission stole her breath. I'm sorry, she whispered. His jaw tightened. Don't. He stood abruptly, pacing once like a man fighting the urge to destroy something, then stopped at the window, staring out at the city as if daring it to try again. They knew, he said quietly. They knew where to look. Silence didn't protect you. Ava swallowed. The baby? He turned instantly. Fine, he said. No trauma, no risk. Her breath shuddered out. Tears burned behind her eyes. He crossed back to her, lowering himself into the chair again. Hands braced on his knees, like he was holding himself together by force of will. "I miscalculated," he said. "I thought keeping you hidden would keep you safe." "And now?" she asked softly.
Now I do whatever it takes, he replied. Openly.
She studied him, seeing something different beneath the steel. Fear, yes, but also resolve sharpened into something final. "They won't stop," she said.
No, he agreed. So I will.
She reached out with her good hand and touched his sleeve. The contact felt electric. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. His eyes lifted to hers, dark and unguarded. "I already tried that," he said. "It almost cost me everything." Silence settled between them, thick with truths that had been circling each other for weeks. "You were right," he continued, "about the difference between being protected and being owned." Her heart skipped. "I thought control was the same thing," he admitted. "I thought if I kept you close enough, nothing could touch you." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know that control doesn't stop bullets," he said quietly. "Love does." The word hung between them, heavy and irreversible. She searched his face. "You never said—" "I didn't plan to," he interrupted. "This was supposed to be temporary, strategic, contained." He swallowed hard. "But somewhere between the contract and the fear of losing you," he said, voice breaking just slightly, "the marriage stopped being fake." Ava's breath caught painfully. "I didn't realize it until I thought you were dying in my arms," he continued. "And all I could think was that I didn't care about strategy, or reputation, or enemies." His hand closed over hers, warm and steady. "I only cared about my family." Tears slid silently down her cheeks. He brushed them away with his thumb, gentle in a way that undid her. "I'm done hiding you," he said. "I'm done pretending this is anything less than real." Her heart pounded. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, eyes locking onto hers, "that from this moment on, you stand beside me, publicly, as my wife, as the mother of my child." Fear flickered, but it was drowned out by something stronger. Belonging. And as he leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers, Ava knew the line they'd crossed couldn't be uncrossed. The marriage wasn't a secret anymore. It was a declaration. The choice came quietly. Not with threats or raised voices or contracts slid across a table. It came in the early hours of the morning, when the hospital corridor was still and the world outside the window looked deceptively peaceful. Ava sat propped against pillows, her arm aching dully, her body exhausted in a way that went deeper than bone. The monitors hummed softly beside her bed. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rolled past. Life went on, indifferent to how close she'd come to losing hers. He stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and controlled, as he issued instructions she didn't ask to hear. Security arrangements. Names she didn't recognize. Orders that carried weight far beyond this room. When he ended the call, he didn't turn right away. "You can still disappear," he said finally. The words surprised her. He faced her then, expression stripped of command, of authority. Just a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't force. "I'll arrange it," he continued. "A new identity, another country, no trail, no connection to me." Her chest tightened. "And you?" "I stay," he said. "I end this. Completely. And the baby?" His jaw flexed. "Protected. Always. From a distance, if that's what it takes." Ava studied him, really studied him, and saw the cost of what he was offering. Letting her go wouldn't be strategy. It would be sacrifice. "And if I don't disappear?" she asked. "Then you stand beside me," he said. "Publicly. As my wife. No more shadows." Fear flickered through her. She didn't deny it. The world he lived in didn't forgive mistakes. Being seen meant being known. Being known meant being targeted. "You won't trap me," she said quietly. "I won't,"
he replied without hesitation. If you choose to leave, I'll never come looking.
The promise landed heavy. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle. The version of herself who'd walked into that private apartment days ago had wanted freedom more than anything. Silence felt like survival. Distance felt like safety. Now she knew better. I spent so long trying to escape this marriage, she said softly, because I thought it was the thing putting me in danger. He said nothing, just listened. But running didn't stop the threat, she continued. It just made me alone inside it. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the city below that didn't know her name, didn't know what she'd endured. She could disappear into it, become a ghost, raise her child far away from guns and guards and whispered warnings, or dash. She looked back at him. She could stand where she was meant to stand. You're not asking me to stay because of the contract, she said. No, he admitted. I'm asking because I don't want to lose you. The honesty in his voice cracked something open inside her. And if I stay, she asked, I'm not just your wife on paper.
You're my partner, he said. In every sense that matters.
Her heart pounded painfully. She thought of the moment she'd said she wanted out, of how small and trapped she'd felt, of how fear had masqueraded as freedom. She took a breath. I'm done hiding, Ava said. He stilled. I'm done pretending this is something I need to escape, she continued. I won't disappear. I won't be erased. She swung her legs carefully off the bed and stood, ignoring the ache in her shoulder, stepping toward him with quiet resolve. If I stay, she said, it's because I choose you, not the name, not the protection, you. He searched her face, as if afraid she'd change her mind mid-breath. I know what your world is, she added. I know what standing beside you means. And you still... Yes, she said firmly. I still choose it. Emotion flickered across his face, unguarded and fierce. She reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. I'm your wife, Ava said, and I'm done pretending that's something to be ashamed of. Outside the window, the city stirred. Somewhere, decisions would ripple outward. Enemies would take notice. But inside the room, Ava felt something she hadn't felt since the moment those two pink lines appeared. Peace. Because she wasn't trapped anymore. She was exactly where she chose to be. The first cry cut through the room like a promise. Ava barely registered the sound at first, only the pressure, the exhaustion, the way the world seemed to narrow to breath and pain, and then suddenly, impossibly, relief. When the nurse lifted the baby into view, small and flushed and furious at the suddenness of life, something inside Ava broke open. He's perfect, someone said. She believed it without looking. Tears slid down her temples as the baby was placed against her chest, warm and real and impossibly fragile. His cry softened almost instantly, tiny fingers curling into the fabric of her gown like he already knew where he belonged. Her heart shattered. She hadn't planned this, hadn't wanted forever, had fought it at every turn. And yet, she looked up. Her husband stood a few steps away, frozen in place like a man who had finally reached the end of a war he hadn't known how to win. His face, usually so controlled, so unreadable, was undone. Awe, fear, something dangerously close to reverence filled his eyes as he stared at the child who had rewritten his life. Come here, Ava whispered. He moved instantly. The moment he touched his son, his composure finally fractured. His hand trembled as it rested over the baby's back, broad and protective, shielding without thinking. Our son, he said quietly. The word carried weight, finality, legacy. Outside the hospital walls, the war had ended not with spectacle, but with precision. Enemies dismantled, names erased, lines redrawn in blood and silence. No one dared test the boundaries he had made brutally clear. The child was untouchable. So was the woman who carried him. Weeks passed in a haze of sleepless nights and quiet moments that felt sacred in their simplicity. The house changed, softer, warmer. A nursery filled with light replaced rooms once used for strategy. Guards still stood watch, but their presence faded into the background as laughter and midnight feedings took center stage. Ava learned him quickly, his moods, his cries, the way he settled only when she held him close. She learned that her husband watched from the doorway often, saying nothing, as if memorizing each breath like he was afraid it might be taken away. One evening, near Christmas, Ava stood by the window again, her son cradled in her arms, lights glittering outside in gentle defiance of everything they had survived. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. Her husband stepped up behind her, wrapping one arm around both of them. "Regret?" "The marriage," she said. "The way it began." He pressed a kiss to her temple, lingering. "I regret thinking it was temporary." She smiled, leaning back into him. "I never wanted forever," she admitted. "I thought it was a trap."
"And now?"
She looked down at their son, at the way his lashes fluttered as he slept, at the steady warmth of the man behind her. "Now I know forever isn't something you plan," she said. "It's something you build." His hand tightened slightly around her. What began as secrecy had become certainty. What began as protection had become partnership. The marriage that was never meant to last had become something unbreakable, not because of contracts or fear, but because they had chosen each other when it mattered most. As snow fell softly outside, and Christmas lights glowed warm and steady, Ava realized the truth she'd spent so long running from. She never wanted forever, until she realized she already had it.